When we first reached the old roads, we thought we had found civilization. For 2 centuries we had crossed the outer dark alone, hopping from one cold halo star to another, building stations in comet swarms, and under the crusts of moons no one had ever named. We had grown in hardship and distance. Our maps were stitched from radio ghosts, gravitic anomalies, and the patient mathematics of empty space. By the time we found the first alien beacon drifting near a dead red dwarf, humanity already occupied more systems than any one government on Earth had once ruled countries. We had done it without mentors, without relics, without a gate left behind by kinder hands. We had made our own fusion throats, our own long-cycle ecologies, our own laws for surviving generations between suns. So when the beacon answered us in layered light and folded fields, when a machine older than our written history turned its attention toward us and sent us coordinates toward the inner lanes, we were awed. The galaxy was vast. It was inhabited. It was ancient beyond anything we had imagined. The first emissaries we met were called, in our translation, the Narethi. They were not bodies in the way we understood bodies. They moved inside lattices of conductive mist, each individual a shifting knot of charge and crystal suspended in a shell of articulated mineral fronds. Their speech was pulses of electromagnetic scent and harmonic stress in nearby matter. They regarded us the way a storm might regard a candle, with no hatred, no warmth, only assessment. They congratulated us on surviving emergence. Then they informed us of our limits. We were taken, politely, through the geometry of the galactic order. Near the center, where stars were dense and old, the great powers had risen in ages so distant even they rendered them as ritual rather than history. Around them clustered younger client civilizations, tributaries, labor species, bounded protectorates, technical castes, breeding reservations, and sacrificial buffers. Expansion rights were allocated. Transit corridors were licensed. Strategic resources were monopolized under ancient conquest claims. Entire species were prohibited from building certain classes of drives or weapons. Some were forbidden to settle worlds with heavy elements above a quota. Some were sterilized after population surges. Some had once rebelled and had been reduced to scattered remnant habitats for the instruction of others. The Narethi did not conceal any of this. Concealment, we slowly learned, was a human instinct. The old powers preferred declaration. Terror worked better when formalized. Our assigned region was a fraction of what humanity already inhabited on the far rim. The maps they gave us simply erased half our living frontier, labeling it undeveloped margin. We understood the message immediately. Accept the recognition they granted, and anything beyond it did not exist in law. Contest it and they would discover it, so we smiled, we thanked them, we accepted. That was the first thing the elder species misunderstood about us. They thought compliance meant belief, it meant counting. We counted their shipping tonnage and fleet patterns. We counted the delay between patrol cycles on neglected outer routes. We counted how often the old powers looked toward the rim and how often they looked only at one another. We counted what technologies were taboo, what assumptions no one questioned, what strategic doctrines had ossified into sacred law. We counted their confidence, because confidence leaves gaps. Most of all, we concealed our age. The official history we presented was a softened thing, stretched and padded, with millennia inserted where there had been centuries and centuries where there had been decades. We lengthened the time between our combustion age and our industrial age, between our industrial age and orbital flight, between orbital flight and interstellar reach. We made ourselves look respectable, steady, slow enough to be normal. A civilization that climbed too quickly, we learned, was treated as a biological hazard. The elder species did not fear moral difference. They feared acceleration. So we gave them a humanity that had ripened at a proper pace, and therefore might be managed. Meanwhile, beyond the line they thought they had drawn around us, shipyards multiplied in dark systems without transponder law. Research arrays hung inside dust veils around dead stars. Fleets moved under drives no inspection team had ever seen. Whole industrial ecologies burrowed into rogue planets drifting between suns. We spread not inward where the old powers watched, but outward and beneath, into cold places they had never valued. Our greatest advantage was not strength. It was that they thought emptiness was empty. At first, the wider brutality reached us in pieces. A human rescue convoy diverted to aid a fractured migrant spindle of the Erie people, cephalized membrane beings who lived in pressurized oceans grown inside transparent cylinders, was ordered away by a Narethi enforcement choir. The Erie spindle had suffered a hull infection and was venting atmosphere, freezing in slow rotation. Our convoy captain pleaded for 6 hours of access. The reply came as legal harmonics and one translated phrase: losses within ration populations do not warrant corridor delay. The spindle broke apart while our ships held position under threat of seizure. We listened to thousands die in whistles of escaping sea. Later, one of our mining colonies in the Hadral Scatter was reassigned by decree to the Vesk assemblages, one of the elder war broods that grew their decision-makers from fused clutches of predatory bodies. They arrived before the decree did. Their landing organisms spread caustic secretions through our atmosphere processors to force evacuation. 52,000 civilians were driven into emergency shelters, while orbital monitors warned us that resistance would void our recognized status. We withdrew under protest. The Vesk consumed the colony's biometals and left its reservoirs poisoned. Then came the Kettle. The Kettle were a younger species like us, if age could mean anything across such minds. They were distributed beings, each intellect stretched across swarms of ribbon-thin photosensitive organisms that nested in stellar shade habitats. We encountered them in a dim cluster of engineered eclipses, where they cultivated vast light-harvesting veils. They were curious, quick, frightened, and brilliant in applied field physics. We traded medical nanofabrication for sensor techniques. We helped them stabilize a failing habitat ring. We knew this was dangerous. Interspecies technological assistance to restricted civilizations required elder approval. We did it anyway, carefully, quietly, because children were dying in their dark. Someone reported it. The punishment fleet arrived not against us, but against them. That was the lesson. Human protest was irrelevant. Human pain was educational only if others watched. 3 Vesk crucible ships and a Narethi adjudication spindle entered the Kettle cluster and announced corrective reduction. We received the transmission as our envoys begged to intervene. The Kettle were ordered to surrender all high-order fabrication matrices and present 1/10 of their reproductive swarms for culling to correct developmental excess. They refused in 1,000 voices of light. The elder ships ignited their habitats one by one. Not cracked them in battle, ignited them. Focused stellar mirrors and particle shears turned entire eclipse veils into expanding blossoms of white plasma. In the last surviving habitat, Kettle young folded themselves around cooling reservoirs while their elders broadcast frantic equations, trying to preserve memory through destruction. Our ships were held at range by legal threat and superior guns. We watched 6 million Allied minds burn because we had dared to share pumps, shielding, and medicine. That night across human space, enlistment tripled. But we still did not strike. That was the second thing the elder species never understood. Restraint is not the absence of fury. Sometimes it is fury under cultivation. We endured inspections. We endured tribute assessments disguised as route maintenance burdens. We endured lectures from emissaries who explained that predation, bounded by tradition, was healthier than uprising. We endured seeing species bred for labor in bone lattices and vacuum pens. We endured hearing, in translation, the ritual logic by which the old powers justified exterminatory punishment. If one young civilization learned ambition from another, disorder multiplied, and disorder invited galaxy-wide death. Therefore, occasional massacres were mercy. They were not monsters in the childish sense. They were worse. They were systems of ancient appetite that had survived so long they believed survival itself was moral authority, and we kept building. Our laboratories learned from every inspection. We disassembled recovered field residues, traced fleet wake signatures, mapped command latency across elder hierarchies. We discovered that many of their greatest technologies were old and powerful, but doctrinally frozen. The Narethi relied on consensus harmonics across immense distances, elegant, resilient, and too slow when severed. The Vesk built devastating war organisms around central brood directives, adaptive in combat, brittle when those directives were drowned in false inputs. The Thune vault mines, who controlled rare transit crystals near the inner lanes, stored strategic decision trees inside moon-sized mnemonic organs that had not been redesigned in 40,000 years because redesign was taboo. They had power. We had iteration. So we iterated in secret. We built drives that did not merely push harder but moved differently, slipping through folded shear layers that elder sensors treated as background noise. We built manufacturing webs that could disperse across 10,000 hidden sites and reassemble outputs on command. We built command systems that accepted local initiative without losing strategic coherence. We built hulls grown from metamaterials able to drink directed energy and turn it into maneuver. We built munitions not to overwhelm shields by brute force, as the old powers expected, but to confuse the field logic beneath them and make protection betray itself. We prepared fallback biospheres, buried archives, autonomous foundries, reserve populations, blackroot depots, med ships, refugee chains. We planned for losing worlds. We planned for carrying the war for decades. We planned because one day we would stop pretending to be harmless, and on that day the galaxy would try to kill us all at once. When we judged that we could survive such an attempt, humanity changed its voice. It did not happen in one speech. It happened across years in tribunals, trade councils, transit conventions, and mourning assemblies, where younger species had long been expected to offer gratitude for not yet being culled. Human delegates began naming crimes without euphemism. Containment was conquest. Tribute under orbital threat was extortion. Sterilization mandates were atrocity. Collective punishment was barbarism. No species, we argued, had the right to cap another's growth by terror simply because it had arrived earlier. Many listened in fear. Some listened in wonder. A few listened with a hunger they had forgotten they possessed. We proposed corridors under neutral protection. Limits on punitive fleet actions, recognition of sovereign borders for developing civilizations, shared technological rights, interstellar law that applied upward as well as down. The elder species reacted with something like offense, though in their minds it was closer to immune response. They did not think we were naive. They thought we were infected with universalism, that dangerous human tendency to treat moral claims as if they should bind strangers. They warned us. We continued. We had not revealed our true power. Our hidden fleets remained hidden. Our outer foundries remained dark to hostile eyes. But our diplomats no longer bowed. That apparently was intolerable. The exemplary punishment came in the inner galaxy, exactly where we knew it would. Far from our concealed strength, close to audiences. The world was called Vale Meridian, though it was not a world in the old sense. It was a chain of 12 habitable cylinders and 3 open-ring agricultural habitats around a blue-white star on a licensed human corridor. 500 million humans lived there, along with nearly 80 million non-human residents from restricted species under formal human protection. Vale Meridian mattered not because it was irreplaceable, but because it was legal. Its charters were recognized. Its transit rights were guaranteed under elder seals. Destroying it would say that no law existed except permission. A convocation of elder enforcement entities arrived without declaration. Narethi adjudicators, Vesk war broods, and 2 Thun relay masses to witness and record. They announced that humanity had spread destabilizing doctrines, harbored unauthorized populations, and interfered with the corrective management of lesser civilizations. Vale Meridian, they said, would undergo reduction as a demonstration that no rhetoric altered inherited order. The governor transmitted every channel open. She appealed to charter law, to corridor guarantees, to the presence of civilians, to the elder seals themselves. The reply was simple. Guarantees endure while obedience endures. Then they sterilized the habitats. They did it methodically. First they spiked transit so no one could flee. Then they pierced the cylinders with field inversion that turned life support against the people inside. Atmospheres roared out in silver storms. Agricultural rings were set ablaze. Docked civilian ships trying to undock fused to their cradles. Emergency shelters were targeted after they lit up with thermal density. The open rings spun with bodies and debris under hard white light. Our relief groups in nearby systems never arrived. The corridor had been closed hours earlier under elder priority. 500 million humans died. Tens of millions under our protection died with them. Across the galaxy, every species understood the lesson intended. Appeal to law and law will burn you publicly. Humanity did not answer. That was the silence. Our embassies closed within a day. Not with threats, not with denunciations. Their doors simply sealed. Human traders abandoned markets mid-contract and departed on schedules no one could predict. Advisors left protectorate worlds, though not before handing local authorities encrypted packages keyed to later dates. Merchant traffic collapsed. Listening posts went dark. Human neighborhoods on mixed stations emptied in orderly waves, taking archives, children, machine cores, seeds, blood banks, art, and saints. On some worlds, our people vanished between one dawn and the next, leaving meals cooling on tables and beds stripped bare. The elder species celebrated at first. They said the corrective action had worked. They said the humans had remembered scale. The younger species were less certain. They had seen too much coordination in the retreat, too little panic, too much purpose. Then in the far outer dark, humanity lit up, not metaphorically, literally. Thousands of hidden industrial stars, long masked by dust shells and thermal veils, erupted into detectable output as concealment protocols ended. Fusion arrays the size of moons ignited. Fabrication swarms unfolded from comet belts in glittering clouds measured in millions of units. Deep space mass drivers began hurling armored components along pre-computed intercept chains. Fleet anchors emerged from rogue planets and dead systems where no elder cartographer had ever bothered to look. The rim became a blaze of manufacture visible across parsecs. The punitive armada the elder powers had already dispatched toward our assigned territories entered that brightness expecting frightened frontier stations and found layered defense spheres, autonomous decoy constellations, and human battle groups accelerating under impossible signatures. I was in the command archive above New Carthage, when the first combat records came in. Even then, after all our years of preparation, they looked unreal. Elder doctrine assumed that any younger species under pressure would concentrate around fixed worlds and trade hubs. We did not. Our fleets fought as distributed organisms, separating and recombining faster than the Vesk brood intelligences could reframe targets. Narethi harmonic command nets found themselves blinded by deliberately seeded gravitational noise and false consensus echoes. Thune transit crystal strikes failed because our ships no longer entered predicted corridors. We crossed angles they had not thought navigable. At Kepri Reach, a Vesk spear fleet attempted its ritual decapitation attack against what it believed was our primary anchor yard. The yard was a shell around an empty volume. When the brood ships committed, the void around them filled with human minds that were not minds at all but folded field inverters. Their own shielding turned inward. 17 crucible ships collapsed like punctured organs. At Hallow Span, Narethi adjudicators tried to isolate our command structure by severing relays across 8 systems. They found no central choir to silence. Human command had become a doctrine of coordinated autonomy. Every task group carried the whole war in miniature. We cut their spindle clusters apart faster than they could regain harmonics, and the surviving mineral fronds drifted cold through the lane. The Elder assault broke in 3 weeks. Then the galaxy caught fire. Not because we set it to, but because everyone who had been held down for centuries finally saw the giant bleed. The Eerie overran corridor stations that had rationed their migrations for generations. Kettle's survivor shards emerged from hidden light caches and burned Vesk sensors, blind across 2 sectors. Labor species in Thune-managed vault systems sabotaged crystal relays and opened prison moons. Protectorates declared for themselves. Tributaries stopped paying. Some begged for human alliance. Some simply rose because now they believed rising was not suicide. That was when our war ceased being a hidden defense and became a general offensive. We moved inward with allies and with ghosts of the dead. Human fleets did not ravage indiscriminately. That would have made us heirs to the same order we were destroying. We targeted command worlds, relay nodes, brood foundries, tribute depots, sterilization arrays, punishment fleets, and the strategic monopolies by which the elder species had kept everyone else caged. Wherever possible, we broadcast surrender terms, evacuation corridors, and protections for subject populations. When elder garrisons tried to use client species as shields, we altered campaigns rather than kill through them. It cost us time. It cost us blood. We did it anyway. The fury was in the precision. We dismantled the Vesk assemblages by severing brood synchronization across their spawning ranges, and then reducing isolated war clutches one by one. We broke the Narethi by collapsing the great harmonic lattices that let their distributed polities act as singular judgment. Once disrupted, many of their constituent minds fled rather than continue a war no longer guaranteed by consensus. The Thune vault minds surrendered slower. They trusted in the inviolability of ancient memory. We cracked their mnemonic moons open with weapons grown specifically to unravel recursive field architecture, and the stored coercion plans of 40 millennia spilled into the void. At every stage, more species joined us, and with every ally the war shortened. Not because they needed us to fight for them, but because they were ready to settle their own accounts once the fear barrier shattered. There were terrible battles. We lost ships by the thousand. Some elder redoubts fought with the dead fanaticism of beings who had mistaken permanence for destiny. Whole systems went dark. There is no honest telling of war that makes victory clean. But the old order was more brittle than it had appeared. It had endured because everyone believed it inevitable. Once that belief died, its age became a weakness. Ritual made it predictable. Monopoly made it narrow. Cruelty had starved it of loyal friends. The last grand rally of the elder species took place in the dense inner lanes around a cluster of ancient fortresses. No younger civilization had ever been allowed to approach in force. They called on every client, every tributary, every protected remnant to preserve galactic continuity against human contagion. Many did not answer. Some answered with weapons pointed the other way. The final battle lasted 11 days. By the end, the oldest war stations in the galaxy were drifting ruins, their sacred firing geometries broken by human drives that refused to approach from permissible vectors. When the surviving elder commanders attempted to threaten mass sterilization of surrounding subordinate populations, their own target control webs were seized by technicians from species they had enslaved for generations. That was the true end of them, not destruction, exposure. Afterward, there were voices among us calling for extinction, for repayment measured in species rather than institutions. They were not incomprehensible voices. Vale Meridian existed in all our minds. The Kettle Burns existed. The Eerie Spindle existed. So did 10,000 other atrocities, older than our arrival, deeper than our grief. We did not do it. We dismantled fleets. We seized sterilization systems. We broke strategic monopolies and opened their stockpiles under supervised law. We confined elder species to demilitarized territories, imposed external oversight, and prohibited the very concentrations of force by which they had ruled. Some of their leadership castes were tried. Some were deconstructed, where personhood in the human sense did not apply. Some societies fractured and had to be administered for generations before they could cease being engines of predation. Humanity did not inherit the throne because there was no throne left worth keeping. The new order began badly, as all honest things do. It was slow, argued over, inconsistent, full of species who mistrusted one another and of wounds that would not heal in one lifetime. But it contained one principle the old galaxy had never possessed. No civilization, however ancient or strong, would again be allowed to cap the future of another by terror. Force would exist because the universe had not become gentle. But no monopoly on force would be sacred. Sometimes I think back to the first beacon near the dead red dwarf, to our wonder when the old machine opened its light and told us we were not alone. I remember how small we felt before the age and scale of the galaxy. We were small. But we had come from the outer dark, where no one expected anything to rise. We had been tempered in neglect, hidden by distance, taught by hardship to build without permission. The elder species looked outward and saw margin. They looked at us and saw a promising minor people who had arrived late. They never understood what it meant that humanity had reached the stars alone. By the time they did, their empire was already breaking apart around them, and beyond the old roads, all along the once ignored rim, the lights of free worlds were turning on.